People are just filtering in, which is great. So why don't we go ahead and we'll open in prayer this morning. And Lord, we do thank you that we can take a look at your word again today. As we do so, I pray that your Spirit might open our eyes and our understanding. Help us, Lord, not only to see your word and the truths of it, but also to see application, things that you want us to learn from this, that we might walk out of here a little closer to you because of the time we spend. Help us to cut it straight, Lord, and to see exactly what you want. Thank you for our time in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so last week we had Bill filled in for me while I was up in Monroe. Linda and I were babysitting some of our grandkids while our daughter and her hubby went to Arizona for a week. So we got to know them a little bit better. They got to know us a little bit better, and that was a lot of fun. So I appreciate that Bill was willing to do that. So last week and the week before, we see Joseph. He's standing before Pharaoh. He basically has gotten cleaned up. He's shaved. He's got new clothes on. He stands before Pharaoh. Pharaoh relates his dream, and Joseph knows the meaning of the dream. Right in the beginning, he talks about the Holy Spirit. When he talks about God, saying that God will give him the answer, and he did through Joseph. And then he does a shocking thing, or at least it would have seemed shocking to a casual observer. What else does he do in addition to telling what the dream meant? He gave him some advice, right? Unsolicited advice, exactly right. It'd be one thing, well, Joseph, what do you think? But now the neat thing is that it's just a flow, right? He's talking, he just keeps on talking. So it's not like I don't think he makes this conscious decision, I'm going to give advice to Pharaoh. He's in the Spirit, and he continues on. But even more shocking than that was what? Yeah, they took him up on it. Not only did they take him up on it, and not only did Pharaoh approve, but it says his advisors thought it was a good idea too. So the ones that you'd expect to go, no, stop talking, hey, that's not a bad idea. And really, when you think about it, that's a big deal because the advisors would have him over them to a certain degree. So it's really amazing that he gives this advice and then he's accepted and he's put in this position of great authority. And we see that from that point on for Joseph, everything is renewed. He has been living as a slave for almost 20 years. Well, not quite 20 years. 13 years, I guess it is. He's been living as a slave, either as a slave to Potiphar or a slave in prison. And now all of a sudden you stand before Pharaoh. Your face is all probably red and whatnot from shaving. He probably doesn't shave at all, right? And all of a sudden you're given new clothing. You're given symbols of authority. You're given that necklace that Bill talked about last week, which basically would be a symbol of your authority. You're given a new name. You're given an Egyptian wife. So all of a sudden it's like he wakes up in the morning in prison, and in the afternoon he's standing before all these people with this medallion, clean shaven and looking Egyptian. I mean, talk about a crazy day. And lottery. Yeah. And it would be one day. And you walk out. Can you imagine walking out stunned? Like what? I mean, I'm glad, but what just happened? I mean, it would have just quite a day. And there again, how old is Joseph at this point? He's 30, right. And Bill mentioned last week that seems to be, in the scriptures, a point of maturity for young men to begin a career. Now, it doesn't mean they can't work for the career before then, but at age 30, it seems to be in biblical, in the scriptures, 30 is a really good point at which to begin your career. Who else began his career at 30, which was very significant? Jesus. Jesus himself was 30. The priests had to be 30 when they began. So 30 is a big deal, and that's, amazingly, is how old Joseph is. We see right away that Joseph does a lot of traveling. Now, the reason he does this traveling is he has a lot of prep work to do. He has to go to these different cities, and he has to set up construction projects for granaries. Now, Al comes to me in the beginning of the class, And he mentions that he looked at some archaeological stuff, and there's actually archaeological remains of what they sometimes call Joseph's granaries. It's real, and they have remains of it. So he had these big construction projects because he had to construct a place where you could store securely the grain. So, when the famine hit, the people are going to be desperate. It would be natural for them to try to steal the grain. So he has to construct granaries which are very secure and well guarded, and also he has to appoint people to be in charge of these granaries. And he has to set up a lot of things. He has to also give instructions. You are to take not 10%, but 20% a year. It's not going to make me very popular, Joseph. Well, but he did. So there's a lot of prep work that Joseph did as he was going to and from. We also see that Joseph, his Egyptian wife, Asenath, I think is how you pronounce her name, she bore 2 children, Manasseh and Ephraim, and these names kind of tell us about the mindset of Joseph. Manasseh means literally forgetting. The Lord is helping me to forget about what happened to me before. And the second name, Ephraim, which means fruitful. The Lord is making me fruitful in the place of my bondage. So that's where we pick up. So we're going to take a look here at chapter 42. We're going to read verses 1 to 5. We are going to start, how about if we start way back? Well, we'll start up here. Eric, please, 1 through 5. Let's go over to Sarah. And Daniel. Verse 5. Okay, so we see now this famine is basically worldwide. Now, by worldwide, I mean in the Middle East. That's their world. And so as far as they're concerned, this is a worldwide famine. Now, there is food in Egypt, but Canaan is languishing, as well as the other areas are as well. Now, in verse 1 and 2, we see that Jacob makes a decision. He's going to send his sons to Egypt to buy food. Now, the question is asked, or could be asked, why didn't Jacob go? He's really old. He's at least 60, right? I mean, the guy can hardly walk, much less go to Egypt, right? No, thank you. I appreciate that, John. Yeah, he has to take care of the rest of his family, his livestock, etc. So another question could be asked, well, why didn't he just relocate? We saw that Abraham did that. We saw Isaac was going to do that until God told him not to. Why didn't he relocate, do you think? Any thoughts? Okay, that's kind of key, isn't it? God didn't tell him to relocate. When Abraham did, it didn't go well for him. He got all sorts of issues from that. Isaac, I think, was going to, but God appeared to him and said, no, stay in the land. So we can gather that perhaps that's what Jacob is thinking. I need to stay in the land, and I'm going to stay here, but I can send my sons, and I'm going to go ahead and send my sons, and he does. Now, it's very interesting. Verse 1, it sounds so modern, right? Why are you just staring at each other? Okay, so what in the world? So I just thought that was weird. I mean, I could see myself saying it to my kids, what are you just staring at each other for? Do X, Y, Z like I said, The thought is, from a couple commentaries I read, that maybe he's been talking about it, he brings up the subject, and they just stare at each other instead of responding. Why would they do that? Why no response? Peggy? They don't want to go? Okay. Dave? Volunteer. Everybody steps back, right? Any other ideas? Aha, Egypt. Let's see. What connection do I have to Egypt? Oh yeah, my brother. Wouldn't it be weird if I went to Egypt and came across Joseph? I mean, how weird would that be? You know, I mean, the chances are so remote as to be not even thought-worthy, right? Egypt's a huge country. He's a slave somewhere. Maybe he's dead. We tell people he's dead. The chances of me running across Jacob, pretty slim. But even so, I think their conscience was pricked. And they look at each other like, oh, but Jacob, he notices them look at each other. He says, okay, get on with it. Okay. But we see that in verse 4, Benjamin is not sent. Why wasn't Benjamin sent? Okay. I like your choice of words, right? He was younger. He was the youngest. We figure he probably was in his early 20s. But what position has Benjamin assumed at this point, Peggy? Yes. Yes. And of his favorite wife, Rachel. Yeah. Joseph was the favored one, and that got him into all sorts of, well, his dreams probably got him in more trouble than anything. But now Benjamin is the favored one, and he's going to protect Benjamin from something bad happening to him by keeping him there at home. And also, he is the reminder of Rachel, his favored wife. Okay? It's interesting. Anyway, and Bill, by the way, thank you so much for filling in last week. I appreciate that. Did you have something you want to say? Oh, okay.
It's possible, unless the father is totally clueless, those boys are not exactly righteous. That's
Okay.
why he sent Joseph in the first place, because there was a question about righteousness and where they were at, because he couldn't trust them. Now, he's got to think, I lost my first son, I'm not going to lose this one, I'm not sure I trust these boys, all the way down to another country, I'm keeping this one.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's a kind of a father's way of looking at it for sure. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Also in verse 5 we see, as it says, now so the sons of Israel came to buy grain among those who were coming. So in other words, there were all sorts of people that were on their way down to Egypt from Canaan. In fact, all the surrounding countries, you have people coming to Egypt because there is food there and they are in the midst of famine. So lots of people are coming, and Joseph and his brothers do too. All right, so let's read verses 6 to 17, and I think we are at Melody. So 6 through 17 here, just one at a time there, one verse at a time. Verse 7 there. Verse 17, Tamara, if you have it. And we'll drop back to Dave. Oh, that's it, 17. Hold on to that. Okay. So we have Joseph and we have some testing, which we'll talk about. So in verse 6, we see that Joseph is indeed the food czar. He is the number 2 man in the kingdom at this point. He's in charge of whether people, in essence, live or die. We talked about a couple weeks ago the importance of finding exactly the right man for this position. And Joseph was giving that advice, and he wound up being the right man. You had to have somebody who wasn't overly concerned about himself or his notoriety, his fame, his riches. You need somebody who really cares for the needs of people and is willing to put his own self aside. Well, for 13 years, that's all Joseph's been doing, is putting himself aside and caring for the needs of others. And so he's definitely ready to take this responsibility, and he does. It looks like Joseph is the one that if you're a foreigner and you're coming in, he's the one that's going to give you a permit or permission to buy food at the granaries. He's the one that you speak to that I don't know what the interview process consists of, except, of course, the one coming up. How he approved or disapproved of people buying food, but there was a process. We also see in verse 6 that Joseph's dreams come true. So we mentioned, and I think Bill mentioned too, that Joseph's he had these amazing dreams, and then later we see the cupbearer and the baker having dreams that are interpreted. They come true. We have Pharaoh's dreams that are given, and he interprets them and whatnot. But his dreams never came true. So you have to wonder if Joseph ever wondered in his mind, I wonder if that was just a blip, or whether it's really going to come true like that. And all of a sudden, verse 6, we see now Joseph was ruler over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. It's not this. They're on the ground. And just like Joseph's dreams, the sheaves bowing to the ground, and later the sun, moon, and stars bowing to him, it's obeisance, I believe is how it's just like almost worship. So they bowed down before him. And you got to think, if you're Joseph, wow, it really did come true. Just like I figured. It's really cool. So Joseph is unrecognizable. Now it says he disguised himself. Now I don't think he disguised himself in the sense that he put anything on. I think he disguised himself by taking a persona. So what do I mean by that? What does Joseph look like as he's standing before his brothers? He is the quintessential Egyptian. Not only that, he's the quintessential Egyptian ruler. He's very, I'm talking about the persona. He's very arrogant, self-centered, suspicious of others. Also, when you look at him, you're going to see this, you've seen pictures of archaeology. You're going to see somebody probably with this it's not really a crown, but this flowing thing that he would have worn. He has no beard. He's clean shaven. He has a medallion. How old was he when they last saw him? No, 17. When they last saw him, yeah. So he was a young man, 17 years old. Okay, and now he's 30. He is much, he's unrecognizable. He's an Egyptian. Matt. Okay. You're right. That's a good point. I didn't think about that. Good. Thanks for adding that. So he's unrecognizable. Plus, is he speaking Hebrew or Canaanite? No. We'll see he's going to speak Egyptian. He's going to use an interpreter. So in every possible way, you look at Joseph, if you and I looked at him, we'd say there's an Egyptian. And they don't recognize him at all. So he's this Egyptian. Now, a couple of commentaries I was studying asked a kind of a neat question, and I just bring it for you, not because there's any answer to it, but because I speculate all the time. Was this plan thought out in advance? What's coming up, Joseph had lots of time. He had 13 years to think about things. So the question was asked, did he have this plan in advance? If and when I see my brothers as a leader, because when he became a leader, what's it going to be like? How am I going to respond? How am I going to talk to them? Or did it just occur to him, when they were standing in front of him, or bowing down before him. And of course, there's no way of knowing, but I thought it was interesting to kind of speculate a little bit. Well, I wonder if he knew. I wonder if he had some ideas of how he's going to do it. But anyway, we see that he goes right into it. So he disguises himself. He makes it clear he makes it seem he doesn't know them at all. He speaks harshly to them. Why harshly? What's that? Yeah. So I hear you're here to spy out the land. So glad to see you, I appreciate that. Thank you. Peggy. Further disguise himself, right? Yeah. Dave. Right. I mean, and think about the situation. Truly, you walked in, you're the son of this man, you've come to buy food, and you're being accused of being a spy. Ooh, how harsh. Yes?
There's probably also an aspect of the anger that was felt over the last 13 years. That's what he's talking about.
Maybe. Maybe there's a hint of anger. Bill. Yes.
I think his whole plan was already formulated, knowing his brothers and knowing how he would deal with them when they came.
And some people think that way as well, which, could very well be. It could very well be. It makes sense because it's so deliberate, right? So he is the very persona of a non-caring administrator suspicious of foreigners. Okay? If he was today, he'd be working at the DMV. Now, I will say I'm absolutely kidding because last couple times I went to the DMV, I really had some good experiences. I think they're trying really hard. But the caricature of the DMV is, hello, can I help? Oh, it's time for my break. Anyway, the accusation in verse 9, you're spies. Now, what is the threat to the brothers of being called a spy? Maybe, or you're dead. You're a dead man. If you're a spy and you truly have come to spy out the land, to seek where you can attack it, you're toast at that time. Okay, nowadays, they put you in prison, you write a book, get rich. Anyway, back in those days, you don't have time to write a book. Okay? And we also see in verse 15, as they're talking, the brothers make their defense. In verse 15, actually go back up. It says, they're sons of one man. Yep. Honest men? Well, maybe. But they're not spies. That's certainly true. And then in verse 13, they go into their family history a little bit because they're trying to prove who they are to show that they are honest people. 12 brothers. The youngest is with our father today. One is no longer alive, which must have surprised Joseph standing there. So he seizes upon the fact that there is a Benjamin. He focuses on Benjamin. And he says he wants to see Benjamin. Unless your youngest brother comes here, you can't trade in the land. Why did he focus on Benjamin, do you suppose? Daniel. Miss his brother? That's probably true. Lem. Yeah, that's true. And it's his real brother, right? I mean, the same father, same mother. Yeah, good. Yes. Okay. Good. Nice. What's Benjamin's situation like? He might have been pleasantly surprised to hear Benjamin was still alive. Oh, the youngest. Oh, good. And he's probably pleased to hear Dad's still alive. Now, it's interesting he didn't ask to see Dad. Why not? Ooh, that's a thought. Dad might have recognized him. I didn't think about that. Anyone else? Any other thoughts on that? So what was it John said earlier? He was old. He's over 60. Can't travel very well. John's going, I'm not speaking up ever again. No, but that might have been part of it because he's older and he doesn't want him to travel. Or maybe Joseph has the idea that he has responsibilities, he can't leave. But anyway, he definitely wants to see Benjamin, and I think Aaron's right on target. How has Benjamin been treated? You know, have the brothers dealt with him the way they've dealt with me? And he wants to know. So we see in verse 17, he puts them in prison for 3 days. Now, put yourself in their place, okay? I don't think he came to them and said, Tony, I'm going to put you in prison for 3 days. I'll get you out. I think it was like he has them escorted to prison. They slam and lock the door, and he doesn't tell them anything. They're spies. How do you treat spies? I don't think they have any idea how long they're going to be there in prison. And I think their knees are clacking together. I think they're terrified. And well, they should be. Because their situation could not be more imperiled. What's Joseph up to? What's he doing? Because, the first couple of times I've read this a long time ago, I thought, all of these little pieces don't necessarily seem to fit. Or do they? What's he up to? Dave? Okay. He was in prison for a long time, and when he wasn't in prison, he was a slave. Maybe he's given just a little tiny taste. Okay? Yes, Jen. Now there's a thought, and Bill mentioned that one time when we talked about it, was we aren't told how long he was in the pit. Wouldn't that be interesting? It was 3 days. Yes. Oh, that's true. The tomb as well. There we have that type Christology a little bit again, right? Kellen, do you have something? Okay, good. And there's going to be a big test with Benjamin. We can't get ahead of ourselves, but he's going to set them up in such a way to see if they do have resentment. So what are they doing? I'll tell you, what's Joseph doing? Here's what Joseph is doing in my guesstimation. Brought in a couple of mining tools. Can't use it to find gold, so I may as well use it for something else right now, right? Okay, so this is a mortar and pestle on steroids. Okay, oops, dust. Anyway, it's 1/4-inch steel, and you have a very heavy piston. Okay, so it's a crusher. So often, I shouldn't say often, occasionally I've been told you can find gold in what we call the parent rock, which is almost always quartz. So what I look for when I'm out mining is I'm looking for quartz that is very crumbly and also is red. Okay, because if it's red, it's full of iron. If it's crumbly, it's been heavily mineralized. It might actually have some gold in it, I've been told. So what I will do is I will take my mortar, my crusher, toss it in there, and then I do this with it. We're not going to do it much more than that because it's kind of noisy. Then I take that, and I crush it up a lot more than this, but I pour it into my pan like that. I then take it over to the water that I have. I usually have a big tub set up to pan it out with, and I pan it out. So basically I slough off anything that is of no value, which is nearly everything. Anyway, if you make yourself the object of your humor, you never run out of material. But unfortunately, there's more truth to it than humor. But anyway, so you pan it out until wow, that looks kind of good. Now, wouldn't that be funny? This is what Joseph is doing. Joseph is putting them in this thing right here. He's smash, 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 crush, crush, twist, bend, twist. What's in these men? We won't know until we smash them up and sift them. And that's what he's doing. He's going to smash these men. He's going to sift these men. He's going to twist them. He's going to make them very uncomfortable. They're going to fear for their lives because he's going to see, what are these men made of? Have they changed since I've seen them last? By the way, it would have been actually 20 years. He's about 37 here now because the 7 good years have passed. We're now into the 7 years of famine. So he's at least 37. It's been 20 years. What kind of men are these? We're going to smash them until we find out. Yes, my dear.
I've also been thinking he has a history of faithfulness to the Lord. And I was thinking the same thing. I think he's in the process of humbling his brothers. Maybe he had, you turn it all on, I will reveal myself. And they will be in a position to see God's forgiveness through me. And they'll be so like, begging, kind of like, we're so sorry, we see the full weight of our wrongdoings. And then couple that with Joseph offering forgiveness and no earthly retribution. And I just see that as a combination of a beautiful picture of forgiveness, love, and humility.
Yes, I agree with you. And you know what? We'll see, there again, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but we'll see the brothers carry this fear all the way until Jacob dies. They kind of think, it's kind of like that phrase of projection, where what's in you, you project on somebody else. They might be thinking, before Jacob dies, he's staying alive, we're staying alive because of Jacob. Now, if it was me, and, I'm talking, if they were talking to themselves, I'd get even the first chance I got. But of course, Joseph is not like that at all. All right, so, have these men come to grips with their sin? Or are they still living for number one? We're going to smash them, crush them, both fold, spindle, mutilate, until we find out. All right, let's read verses 18 to 25, and I'm not sure where I left off. Okay.
Now Joseph said to them on the third day, "Kiss and live, right or wrong."
Over to Sam.
You are understand that one of your brothers may be complained, for you are destitute, let the rest go, and great dreams in the hand of your husband.
Bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die. And they did so.
And Cheryl, verse 22, if you don't mind. All right, Scott, you do verse 24? All right, hold right there. Thank you. So, verse 18, it's intriguing. He brings the brothers up out of prison. Now, you can bet they're still scared spitless. Oh, great, our time in prison's done. What now, So he brings them before him. And one of the things he says to them, do this. He's going to give them instructions. If you do this, you'll live because what? What does it say? I fear God. Now, isn't that strange? Here's an Egyptian leader, somebody who has been harsh to them, who's thoroughly Egyptian, which meant he would have worshipped all sorts of gods, including, I'm guessing, that the god on his necklace may have been a sun god Ra. It may have been, symbol of his authority. And he says, I fear God. Why did he say that? Isn't that weird? Any thoughts? Maybe it was a degree of comfort. Maybe it was to remind them there is a God and he is in the midst of this. It may be that. Because there's really no other reason for him to say that. What purpose does it serve? Right? Yes?
It's almost like he's giving them
Yeah, it is. Almost like he tips his hand just a little bit, like in a card game, just a little bit. I've got one ace. Oh, no, I don't. That kind of, yes, Matt?
I think it adds to his authority by using the name of the God that they know and serve.
Ah.
As compared to Egyptian gods, which they don't believe at all.
Nice. That's a good thought, too. I didn't think about that. Maybe he is adding to his authority by saying, I know your God, too. That's a good point. Didn't think about that. Good. Sometimes, I teach driving school part-time, 911 driving school. And sometimes the kids, when they enter the car with me, are terrified. I mean really terrified. Not just terrified of driving, although it might be that. Often they're terrified of me because, you see, I'm pretty intimidating. I had 2 kids this last week, and there was a guy, a young man and a young gal, separate drives, of course, and they're literally shaking as they're putting their hands on the steering wheel, So I said, this always helps, I think, with the female students. I said, here's the deal, okay? Number one, I'm not an evaluator. I'm not judging you. I'm your coach. I have 10 children, which stops them in their tracks. It distracts them a lot. I have 6 daughters, like you. I've trained all of them to drive, and I'm going to train you to drive too, okay? No pressure. I'm just here to help you learn to drive. That almost always helps. With the boys, it's just like, I'm just your coach. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not going to make fun of you. Well, maybe I'll make fun of you. And there again, it's a little bit of a joke, right? A little humor helps. And the idea is, they may still be nervous about driving. I don't want them to be nervous about me necessarily, like I said. So, maybe he's giving them a little encouragement. Maybe. But we see in verse 19, there's a change of plan. Okay, the situation is that you still have all these people back up in Canaan, Joseph's family, that are on the verge of starvation. How many people are up there, by the way? Do you remember? Including the brothers? Actually, 66. There are 70. You're right. I'm thinking about Joseph and his wife and kids are still there. But with the brothers going back, there'll be 66. So that's a lot of people. And not only is 66, but also servants too. It wouldn't have just been the brothers and their families. It would have been servants too. It's a lot of people depending on these people. And also, I think Joseph realizes that one person would have a hard time taking all these pack animals full of food. Plus, you got to worry about people who might rob you along the way. They're less likely to do it if there's more people. So, he says, I'm going to let you go back and go ahead and take food to your family. And he says, but I'm going to keep one of your brothers in prison, and you're going to bring me your youngest brother to prove to me that what you said is true. Now, we see in verse 21, how do the brothers react? What emotion do they display? Not just guilt, but distress or dismay. Like I said, these folks are terrified. They just got out of prison. And they're hearing their fate. They're scared spitless. And there again, Joseph is smashing them, crushing them, etc. So, typically, there would be a time set. I don't think there was here necessarily. But typically, you would say, this brother I'm putting in prison, if you aren't back by January 5th, he's dead. What purpose does this brother in prison serve for the other brothers? Hostage. What does it guarantee? They'll come back for him, he hopes. Bye! Never liked you anyway! No, typically, you would. And Reuben, in the midst of all it, he gives us rebuke. This is kind of cool. So I picture them, here's Joseph, here's his guards and stuff, and they're kind of like clustered in a group like this, and they're talking to themselves, and Reuben's, I tried to tell you not to do that. What were you people thinking? Don't you listen to me, And here's Joseph, who can understand everything, and they don't know. But it has an impact on Joseph. What does he do? He goes out and he weeps. He has to turn and walk away, which, might not have said anything to the brothers weird. He's the Lord of the land. He can do whatever he wants, right? He walks out. And why is that? Why did this affect Joseph this way, do you think? He had one that stood up for him that he probably didn't know, which is kind of cool. Good. Anyone else? Bill?
I think he's seen there's actually something in these guys to even feel this way. They're feeling shame and remorse toward what's going on. In some societies, they don't even, it's if they don't even notice if somebody pleads, cries. In fact, that's a sign of weakness if you were to do that. Study about the American Indians. You don't show any sign of weakness.
Right.
They only respect bravery. And if you were to do this, that would show you, they're worthless.
Yes.
So it depends on the society, but here, this is showing compassion.
Yes. Good. Good. Dave?
Brothers are showing he's still out of conscience, too.
Yeah.
This is 30 years later, we decided, and any kind of pressure, and they don't realize he can hear what's going on. But what comes out when you put things in pressure? The stuff you want or the stuff you've done.
Right.
You get to see what's really in there. You're starting to see, I think, some of what you wanted to see in his brothers is really there.
He's sifting them and he's seeing some remnants of conscience that maybe hadn't been around for a while. Peggy? I told you so. Now, that's so cool. I love that stuff about the Bible because the truth of the Bible is it matches human interaction. And I told you so, you dimwits, I mean, that's what we would say. After 20 years. Exactly right. So their conscience is alive. So we see that Simeon is selected. Simeon is bound before their eyes. They then take him away, put him in prison. Now the question is asked, why Simeon? What do you all think? Any ideas? I had none either, but some folks say, well, did he volunteer? Or tradition has it that Simeon was the most cruel of all the brothers. He was the cruelest. And therefore, Joseph would have known that. Maybe he needs more of a timeout. Timeouts are good, right, Lem? I wish you could see his face. It's very honest. Not so much. He needed more time to reflect, perhaps. And so Joseph gives him that time. And so he gives them something that they may or may not have known about. In verse 25, he fills their sack with grain, and he also gives them provisions for the journey. Normally, he wouldn't have done that. Here's your food that you bought, all of it, see ya. But it looks like he gave them extra that they may not even have been aware of in order to eat on the way. It's at least a 2-week journey, if not more. So food to eat on the way. So they'll have all the food intact when they arrive back home, which is kind of cool. And then, of course, we see that he gives their money back in their sack, which is it's interesting too, isn't it? Let's read verses 26 to 28. We're back there with Linda. There's a discovery. So they're at camp somewhere along the way, and he opens the bag to give some fodder to one of his donkeys, and there's the bag, and he opens the bag, and there's the money. It probably would have been pieces of silver that they would have used to purchase the food. There it is. And the response, what is their response? They're being set up emotionally. What do they show? They're terrified. They're scared. Why? Peggy. Accused of stealing. Lem. So once again, They're afraid. Here's this guy in power. There's this money. Comes from who knows where. Anyone else? Dave?
He's been accused of being a spy. Spent 3 days in prison. He got the brother as a hostage. And now, well, I mean, the money's sitting here. I'm guilty by
Association. Kind of, right? Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this. How moral can you expect a spy to be, a true spy? Would the spy concern himself with being careful not to steal from his opponent or something like that? I mean, he might be to maintain appearance, but when he knows nobody can see him, how concerned is he about the land that he's spying on? No. Morally, you're bankrupt. You're a spy. Okay? So to steal is a lesser thing than to be a spy. Bill?
There are other options too. Is what is God doing to us?
Which is what they say.
Guard and turn to God.
Perfect. Good. So they're terrified, they're scared, and there again, they are asking. And notice this is the only place where they mention God. Now, Joseph mentioned God. This is the only place in the chapter where they talk about God. And they say is, what is God doing to us? I think, being crushed and smashed, their conscience is awakened. They realize that whatever is happening could very well be God dealing with us as we deserve. Now what is God doing? Now, if you get found out for stealing, as well as being a spy, the two just add together and form a much bigger picture. And that's why they're scared. I mean, they're terrified because they're going to be put to death, they think. They're scared, very scared. So let's read verses 29 to 38, and we're back. Let's see, Beth's group back there.
When they reached their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them.
The man who is the Lord of the country spoke harshly to us and accused us of spying on the country.
So we said to him, "We are armed men, we are not spies."
We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no longer alive, and the youngest is with our father today in the land of Canaan.
The man who rode the land said to us, "By this I will know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me, and take grain for the famine of your household and yours."
But bring your youngest brother to me, that I may know that you are not spies, but honest men. I will give you your brother to you, and you may trade the land.
Now it came about, as they were emptying their sacks, that behold, every man's bundle of lint was in his sack. And when they and their father saw that their bundle of lint, they were dismayed.
I'll read the rest. Their father Jacob said to them, "You have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more. Simeon is no more. And you'll take Benjamin. All these things are against me." Then Reuben spoke to his father, saying, "You can put my 2 sons to death if I don't bring him back to you. Put him in my care, and I'll return him to you." But Jacob said, "My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead. He alone is left. And if harm should befall him on the journey you are taking, then you'll bring my gray hair down to Sheol in sorrow." Well, you know, that's kind of the way. Anyway. So discovery, verses 27 to 28, they had that discovery, but now everybody is going to make a discovery. We see in the first few verses, the story is accurately relayed. Now notice they say accurately what's happened to them. They go, the man treated us like spies. He did this and this and this. Can you imagine being Jacob and hearing this? You know, I sent my sons down to buy food. They're being accused of being spies. The first thing I think of is, what stupid thing did you do? You know, I mean, you couldn't take pictures back then, but what stupid thing did you do to make them think that you're spies? That's the first thing I would think of, especially with these brothers being the characters that they are. But then we see further discovery in verse 35. Now, for some reason earlier, when that one brother found his money, it doesn't look like the other brothers decided to check their bags, like, well, I wonder what I have in my bag, you know. But here they did. So they empty their bags probably into containers, which they store them, you know, early Tupperware. Anyway, they, they empty them, and as they do, their bags of silver are discovered. And then in verse 35, how did they react to that? Yeah, Yahoo, I got money I didn't expect. No, they're dismayed. This again is going to add to the accusation that they're spies, and they know it. I just love Jacob's conclusion at the end of verse 36, which is why I more or less paraphrased it as the title. Verse 36, he says, "You've bereaved me of my children." And, in this sense, he's more accurate than he thinks, because they did, Joseph in particular. Joseph is no more. Simeon is no more. It's almost like he wrote Simeon off in kind of a strange way. "And you'll take Benjamin. All these things are against me." Everything's against me. Has it ever been a time in your life where you say to yourself, everything looks against me? Everything. I can't do anything. I can't get a break. Everything I do falls apart. That's his conclusion. And yet, he couldn't have been more wrong. In a very short while, Jacob is going to be surprised and thrilled beyond his wildest dreams. He never, ever would have thought he would ever see Joseph again, much less as the ruler of Egypt, much less to take care of them as he's going to do. He never would have thought those things. It's going to get far, far better. Bill.
Not only that, but he will be exalted because of his son.
Yes.
He will be incredibly blessed to the point when he dies that Pharaoh almost worships him as a great man.
He does. That's right. That's a good point. Jacob is exalted because of Joseph and what Joseph did. Excellent. So Jacob is saying everything is against me. And by the way, if you haven't had a moment like that in your life yet where you think everything's against you, just keep living. You probably will. We have, But there is God, and God is in control. And in this case, Jacob is going to be amazed and absolutely overwhelmed with joy, whereas now he's overwhelmed with fear. Now, Reuben makes kind of a ludicrous offer in verse 37. He says, "You can put my 2 sons to death if I don't bring him back." Really? My grandkids? Now, I'm going to give Reuben the benefit of a doubt and say he probably was trying to do something good. But, there are days, but most days I would never do that to my grandkids. Just kidding. Just kidding. If you're watching, kids, just kidding. No, you would never harm your grandkids as a grandparent. And so, but like I said, I'll give Reuben the benefit of a doubt and say, well, he meant well, perhaps. But what was Jacob's declaration in verse 38? Paraphrase, Peggy?
My son will not go down to Egypt.
That's right. He makes a declaration melodramatically that his son will not, under any circumstances, go down to Egypt. There's no way that's going to happen. And that, in his mind, ends the issue. And he says also in verse 38, he says that in the second line, and he alone is left. So we talked before that a few weeks ago that, in a sense, Jacob probably considers Joseph and Benjamin to be his only real sons, because the wife of the one that he wanted, or the wife he wanted. Yes? Yes. And you know what? They would have picked up on that more than likely. Bill.
I wonder if this is where the death of that favoritism in the line finally starts dying.
Okay.
Because this was an incredible disadvantage to his whole family, this favoritism stuff.
Yes.
It happened with Abraham, Isaac, and now Jacob. And it seems to flow through the family. The sins of the fathers continue.
Yes.
And this is where it, through Joseph, dies.
Good. The favoritism, in essence, dies an ugly death here. Good. This isn't going to happen. But of course, What's not going to change? The famine. The famine is going to continue for at least 6 more years, depending on where this thing is. So the famine is going to make Jacob have to re-examine his decision very soon, because he'll have no choice. So God, Joseph, the famine, they all have Jacob right where he needs to be, in essence. Any takeaways? Yes, sir.
As a sheep producer, and there's famine in the land,
Yeah.
you had to butcher all your animals to survive, and your net worth is dropping completely, and it's going to provide some grain for his animals. So that's a huge amount of grain.
Okay. What Al is saying is, as a sheep producer, if you have livestock and you have no grain, you're going to start slaughtering your livestock, which will mean your net worth is diminishing as well. And they probably would have gotten grain for the livestock too. Good. Any other thoughts? Any other takeaways? Yes.
Well, I was going to say that it's interesting. You kind of went through here where you said the story is accurately relayed. The brothers didn't try to cover up what happened in Egypt and make it look better or lie like they did with Joseph earlier. So it's another part of the change you can see in these brothers, that they were honest with their father. They didn't try to cover up and
Okay, didn't try to cover up. Yes.
It is interesting the shift in his life that he spent so much at the beginning of his life betraying and tricking other people and doing things to them. And at the tail end of his life, he says, "Let everything happens to me."
Oh, that's a great point, isn't it? Yeah, like you're innocent, kind of, sort of. Well, I'll say that part of that's probably just due to the emotional distress he's under, but yes.
yeah, I was just thinking the same thing, how Reuben was talking about, I told you so. He's still feeling the guilt of what they did to Joseph. But Jacob's sitting there doing, woe is me, when he's the one that cheated his own brother out of his birthright.
Oh boy, isn't that going back in time? Yeah, good point. Good point. Maybe it should have been, yeah, I probably deserve all this stuff happening to me. Okay. You know, we always quote Romans 8:28, you know, that God is working everything for good, and that's true. But then Romans 8:29 and 30 say the reason why, which is he's making us more like Jesus. So everything works together for good, including the bad things that happen, to make us more like Jesus. The crusher that they're going through, yes, it was designed kind of by Joseph, but it's to make them, to bring out the value that they had that was unknown until it was crushed and smashed and sifted. And there's more. There's more to come. This isn't the end at all. So let's close in prayer. Lord, we thank you. We thank you for Joseph. Thank you for including this information, Lord, in the book of Genesis. And you include it in such an amazing modern fashion. We have narrative. We have explanation. We have even people and the things they think. Their emotions. Father, how wonderful is the gift of your word. Father, I pray that you might take your word. Help us, Lord, to have hope, to trust in you, even when things are bad and we are being crushed. Help us to trust you because you are working out for good, bringing out value in us that maybe we ourselves don't even know we have. We thank in Jesus' name. Amen.